Next, I'll be going through the different scenes. So I have a total of 6 scenes. The first scene is the starting scene, and the second scene is for players to select the different levels in the game. So the other 4 scenes is to toggle between the first, second, third, and the fourth levels. Next, I'll go through the assets. I don't really use a lot of assets. I only mainly use one asset, but I'll go through all the assets I've used so far. So Gear Factory is a asset used for pre-development when I was first starting out. This was very helpful for me to develop different types of gears and for me to test out the different gears. Next is the OAVG, a simple 2D UI package. So you see all these tutorials where they have the buttons. That is from the 2D simple UI packet. The last assets I have it's not here because I just stole some of the art assets and make do, but it's basically asset I'll be showing somewhere here. Next, I'll go through the different prefabs that exist in the game. So firstly, the ones that make up the game as a whole. Firstly is the game 2. So this game 2 is basically how I make different levels. So I have this prefab that contains the instructions to create a level. So if I have the main things like the main camera, the managers, that is already set to a specific settings, and when I want to create a different level, I can just tweak the settings to my liking. Next is the music manager. Is just to play the music. That's all it does. The scene transition is to transition between different scenes. Next are the gears. So there are different gears. So this is all the draggable gears that exist in the game. So the 8 tooth, 12 tooth, and 18 tooth. So they all use the draggable gears like I said before. Next is the obstacle gear. Obstacle gear, you see this is the obstacle gear, and this is the obstacle. This is the obstacle, and this is the obstacle gear. This is only found in level 4. So this gear will turn black based off the color data. Next is the one directional gear. This one is a bit harder to make, but basically it just change the sprites of the gear and then put in the one directional gear class, which specifies how to rotate. So it's the 8 tooth, 12 tooth, and 18 tooth. Next are the joints. The joints are a bit special because they are more of a 3D object because it interacts between different Z indexes. A level button for the UI, which you will see in the game, and the level button, which is the item button, which is to put in the gears and the gear name and how much money there is in the gear. So it looks a bit weird in the prefab, but it's based off the layout which I set for the canvas. So if you can see in the canvas, I put a horizontal layout group, so it will be stretched out in the end. Next, I'll talk about the animations. So these are all the animations I use in the game. It's not that much. So for the end gear panel, is basically this panel here that tells the player that they have completed the level. The gear panel is the panel here that tells them if it's activated or not. So if an activated state to show that it's activated in the game. Transition is basically to transition back to the deactivated state, and so on. The layer manager is the panel here. So it has the layer buttons which the player can toggle. So it will be inactivated like this, but it will be activated when you click the button here. Next is the money manager. This one is a bit special. You won't see it here because it's covered up, so give me a moment. So animation here. So it shows the animation of adding money and removing money. the tooltip is basically the one here, so it tells different helpful information for players to know about the game. Finally, the transition is the one to transition between different scenes, so it will go in and go out. For the pros, I think the scripts I have all made is very scalable. So, for instance, the buttons, I can easily create it. Another thing is how I create a level. Since I have a prefab dedicated to making levels, I can easily create different levels in a short time span. A con I have is the bugs I face. Those I can predict some of the bugs that I encounter. Most of them are pretty unexpected because of certain flaws in the logic, which I still can't seem to figure out. As the game grows bigger, it's very hard for me to encounter the bugs and to try to figure out the causation of the bugs. So in one of the problems is when the gears suddenly appear and disappear. I predicted that it might be because of the pulling in the item button, because the item button uses the pulling pattern, which I might say is a bit bad in for my taste. It's good enough to work in the game, but I feel like it could have been better improved. As of now, because of the pattern, I find it a little bit hard for me to debug and figure out why is it doing making the gears disappear. Another problem I face is doing the one directional gear, as it's supposed to jam different gears, but for some reason it can still jam the gears even if it's away from the other gears, which is another problem I'm trying to fix. And I actually discovered the bug, but I realized the solution can be a bit time consuming, as it's already nearing the deadline. Some of the possible enhancements I can make is to have a script dedicated to debugging, as towards the end of the project, I find it very hard for me to debug and to figure out where is the bug occurring. Usually my main debugging tool is just to use the debug.log and the debug and the print function to print out different variables for me to know what's going on. But as the gear scale and there's a lot of gears happening around the scene, it can be a bit hard for me to figure out why is it happening. So having a script and using things like gizmos will be able to help me debug faster and to create a better game that has lesser bugs.